everyone, and welcome to today's conversation on leadership. Please let us know where you're joining from in the chat section. We'd love to see that. We are thrilled to have you with us for a conversation on leadership, and we look forward to sharing some of the key leadership lessons from the book Lessons from Leaders. Lessons from Leaders is a diverse collection of candid stories from 15 remarkable leaders who share their insights, experiences, and the practical lessons we can all apply to shape our own personal leadership journeys. With that, I would like to introduce you today, our host, Sam Schreiber. He's the Executive Vice President of Thought Leadership and Training Transfer at the Center for Leadership Studies, the author of From Coach to Coach and the 4 Moments of Truth, and co-author of Lessons from Leaders. Great to see you, Sam.
Susie, thank you very much. Thanks, Eric, for everything you're doing behind the scenes. And on behalf of everybody at the Center for Leadership Studies, want to welcome all of you here. And I appreciate you giving up the time that you're giving up to invest in hearing from what I think will be a very entertaining and educational guest, Mr. Jim Duncan. But thanks very much. Back in a second.
Absolutely. And our guest today, like you said, is one of the extraordinary leaders from the book, Jim Duncan. He's a retired senior vice president from Comdisco, was one of the top 10 sales professionals in America as identified by Fortune magazine, and he helped grow computer leasing giant Comdisco from 60 million in annual revenue to over 4 billion. Jim, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Susie. It's an honor to be here, and thank you, Eric, for making sure my computer's working properly. And a big thanks for Sam for writing this wonderful book. How we came about to include me as one of the 15 leaders in the book, I don't know, but I'm clearly honored, and I learned a great deal from Lessons from Leaders. So, Sam, thank you for writing it, and I look forward to volume number 2.
Well, I'll tell you, thank you again, Susie, but not only were you one of the 15, leaders that were featured in the book, you were the first. And this process went a little slower than we thought it would for a bunch of different reasons. But I don't know if you remember, about 3.5 years ago in 2017, we sat down here at the office, and that was your interview. And safe to say, quite a bit has taken place, over that 3.5 years, in everybody's lives and around the world. But I'm wondering, since you were the first and you had a series of updates, and you've got the book right in front of you, I'm assuming that you had the opportunity to, peruse through some of the other chapters, if not, read them in a dedicated way. But we'll get to your message here pretty quickly. But what might you tell our listeners about some of the other leaders that are in the book that, for whatever reason, their message resonated with you?
Well, I have to tell you, I think it's like one of the coolest things in my life to be in a book with Pat Summitt. So I've been telling everybody about the book, and that I'm one of the people, and I'm 2 chapters removed from Pat Summitt. So that's just a great thing, and all the leaders. Here's something that really, I've read the book and I intend to read it again. The thing that really struck me in an overall picture was that the leaders that you interviewed did not really talk about a lot of transactions and business deals and problems that they had. It really had a lot to do with the development of themselves as a person. They talk about humility, the courage of a Darrell Davis. It's just amazing. I mean, I think I've watched your interview with Alan Mulally 3 times, and I was trying to figure out what is it that he's sharing here, and I came up with one word. I mean, he was joyful, and that's something you don't see every day. I would have loved to have been on his team. The humility of the people that you interviewed, every one of them learned from somebody and passed that baton along to someone else. Alan, for instance, talked about his mom and all the expressions that she had. And I can't forget his laundry sitting with the family and folding laundry. So all of them had a plan, but all of them had fun. And you put that together, and you're talking more about a whole person and the development of a person that ends up sharing that with others. And that's what really, really struck me about the various leaders that you've chosen.
Well, I'll tell you, just to walk down memory lane with your incentive there, I will never forget meeting Pat Summitt for the first time, and it was at the University of Tennessee. And I think at the time she had won one national championship and also an Olympic gold medal, and she was a big deal, you know, and she really, as much as anybody, had so much to do with, you know, not necessarily putting women's basketball on the map, but defining it in a very different and very serious way. So, you know, she's on television all the time, and you're a little bit intimidated, like when you're going to meet somebody of that stature. And I can't begin to tell you how much she went out of her way in a very genuine manner to make me feel comfortable, guys on the camera crew comfortable. It was just like her natural, that's the way she was. And at the same time, in the same instance, you could tell she was as fiery and as competitive a person as you will ever find anywhere. You
Well,
know?
I root for the Lady Huskies of Connecticut. We had a disappointing loss the other day. So we played Tennessee a lot of times. And
Oh yeah.
respect for what she accomplished. She was a wonderful woman. And
Yeah, those are classic matchups. And as you mentioned, Daryl Davis, I think in every interview we've done, clearly in his, but in every interview we've done, Daryl Davis's name came up. And when you talk about courage and you know, think about for a minute an African American man showing up at Klan rallies to provide people with just this dissonance of, wait a minute, you know, here's all this hatred I've been programmed to believe in, and then here's a guy that calls that into conflict. And you know, like 75 people, something in that general realm, 75 card carrying members of the KKK turned their robes into him and said he was the primary reason that you know, they got out of that organization and started to view things differently. But yeah, courageous leader. And you know, same with Alan Mulally. I you know, it's difficult to read this book and not gravitate to that chapter. And it's wild how similar Alan Mulally's values as a leader are with those of Patrick Stokes, who is a high school football coach and has been his entire life. But they do simple things and they execute those simple things and they do it with joy in their heart. So you know, thanks for you know, thanks for that. You also, you talk about like the whole person, you know, as you were mentioning that in your introduction. And I really thought in your chapter, one of the things that resonated with me the most was the whole idea of the worry tree. And we're much more conscious now of, yeah, I don't know if there's work-life balance or where everybody sits on those type issues, but long before that was sort of in the front of everybody's mind, you had this worry tree, which was really an intriguing part, I thought, of your chapter. Tell us a little bit about that and kind of how that deals with the whole person concept of leadership.
I don't know where I came up with it. I read it somewhere. I'd like to say it was my idea, but I had you know, you do a lot of transactions. You have pressure to make quota. You're making quarterly numbers for Wall Street. You're doing all the things that take place in business, and sometimes it wears on you. I always believe that if your job is the center of your life, you're going to fail at it. And so it may take up most of your time when you're going through your career. But if it's the center of your life, I think you've got a real issue. And you may be really good for some time period, but if you're not a whole person, meaning that you're involved in other things, then I think you're destined for failure. So I read this somewhere where somebody created a worry tree. And what I would do is I'd come home and I'd pull into the driveway and I'd just stop the car for a moment. And I'd envision that I'm throwing my briefcase out onto the tree. big old maple tree. It was a beautiful, it's there. It's a beautiful tree. And when I walked in the door, I became a husband and a dad. And that's what my job was at that point. So what took place in my daughter's day and what took place in my wife's day as a nursery school teacher became the most important aspect of my life at that point. I had to cut it off. And that, that's all about service. We talk about service to others, which is an integral part of my life. But you need to service yourself with the ones you love. I'm proud to say, as you know, Sam, we just a few weeks ago, Betsy and I celebrated our 50th anniversary. So we've done something right, and maybe the worry tree was part of it. But it allowed me to become a dad again. It allowed me to become a husband, and I did that faithfully. It took a long time to get to that point, but I did that faithfully when I walked in the door. It was very helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure you've met people like this in your career, and did chat with Al Malali a little bit about this as well. That it's almost like you have individuals that are very successful at work, but it's almost like if you see them at work, you wouldn't recognize them at home. Like they become somebody entirely different, right? They pass the worry tree in the morning, if they even are aware of one, and they just strap on this armor and this demeanor, and they go into work, and they become somebody drastically different than who they are, at home and in life, and those things can be in conflict. And it's a difficult dilemma that I think all of us, especially those that have real career aspirations, you need to come to grips with. Who are you? Like from a genuine standpoint, who are you? What do you believe in? What do you stand for? What are you trying to achieve? And to never sacrifice that foundation or that genuine nature, whether you're at home or at work.
And Sam, to your point, but we did a lot of interviewing. We had a system of potential people that we were going to hire that sat on, they were just graduating from college, and we didn't have the wherewithal to train people, but we would direct them to go to some companies, and then we would look at them 3 to 4 years down the road. But the question you asked, who are you, was a question that we asked all the time. We wanted to make sure that if they were going to be successful in our company, that they had a life outside of our company. And so that who you were, how you think, not necessarily what you know, were very key, critical aspects of who we hired.
Yeah, and I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but please do it gently, since there's a lot of other people listening in here, if you wouldn't mind, in terms of giving me that feedback. But in general, you said you took a long time to hire somebody, and if for whatever reason they got in and it was, became evident early on that they weren't going to fit or weren't going to make it, that you made decisions pretty darn quickly to have serious conversations with that person about, maybe both of us made a mistake here. So a long time, there was no momentum or emotion associated with hiring somebody into a position of significance. But if that wasn't going to work, for whatever reason, or everybody started getting the sense that that wasn't going to work, that there was also, a pretty aggressive action on the other end, that said, hey, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe both of it. How do we get ourselves out of this? Because maybe both of us did the wrong thing here. Was that accurate in terms of?
It's accurate, but I think we kind of looked at it from the standpoint it's you go through a great deal of expense and time to hire someone, and if it's a wrong hire, it's you've wasted a lot of money and time and talent, not only for yourself but also for that person. So we spent a lot of time, and I know today it's very, very different in hiring people, but there was a lot of face time. So sitting down with someone and getting to know who they were and how they would react in certain situations, what they would lend. We always felt that there are many parts but one team, and how would that person fit in, and what role will they play in what we believed all the time was that we were growing something, we're building something. And so this person, if we made a bad hire, that's really poor leadership on our part. So we took that very, very seriously.
Yeah. Speaking of which, and I know we're talking about 25 or 30, maybe even more years of your life here, so it's tough to get you to encapsulate this. But just for those of us that would really have dreams about doing something like this, what's it like to be sort of the commercial face or one of the primary commercial faces for an organization that is a $60 million company, which is, depending on your perspective, a pretty good size, I guess, right? But to grow that from 60 million to 4 billion, what is that? I was about to refer to it as a roller coaster ride, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's something. But what is that ride like?
It
To
is
go from
a roller coaster right now. And first of all, it's a lot of fun. It was like playing a sport every day. Uh, Most of our people were totally committed to our plan. Uh, it was a real team effort. But here was a real rub, if you will. We were truly an entrepreneurial company. We our salespeople did transactions. They built customers, long-term relationships, and did very well for themselves. But that was easy when we were $60 million company. All you had to do is pick up the phone and call someone. And then all of a sudden, one day we woke up and we were a real company. And that brought in a whole bunch of other factors like management, like human resources, things that many of us were just not used to. And and I would say that we did a pretty good job, but I think in retrospect, we could have done a much better job when we became a real company. It was just, and I know books are written on it, but we went from an entrepreneurial stage to a real company stage where it was there was a lot of pain that we went through because personalities were geared to the entrepreneurial phase of our growth. When we became a real company, it became very different. So processes, procedures, things that I would just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, get this done. I need it done now." That didn't happen anymore. So we all had to grow in that time frame, and for me, some of it was painful, uh, but as a journey, it was just phenomenal. It was something that every day, opportunity was knocking on your door, and we got to a point where we became leaders of our industry. We created a whole other industry in disaster recovery for data centers, and that almost grew to a $300 million business overnight. So the answer is it was a blast. But man, we wish we could have had the Center for Leadership Studies then, because we didn't recognize, we didn't know. We had some great leaders. Our founder was phenomenal. Ken Ponticus was an incredible human being. In fact, reminds me very much of Alan Mulally. However, there was pain there.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it is it's amazing to kind of look back, I would think, on something like that and be able to say, like, there was no blueprint, right? We didn't know, what we were doing. And when change happens, we readiness shifts, but I would imagine, if I was to say the term ego, and some of your primary players when Comdisco was a small entrepreneurial place, maybe yourself included in this, that we're now being asked to be conscious of processes and working things through other people and everything. Like, how were those inevitable conflicts resolved? Was that like a top-down thing? Was it a team thing? Did people recognize individually that hey, things are different? If we want to get there, we got to do something different here.
So it was kind of like through trial and error. Again, we didn't have that training aspect of things. I'll never forget when I joined Comdisco. Uh, I was given half of New York. There was a person who was covering all of New York City, upstate New York. That gentleman didn't talk to me for 2 years. He thought I was taking his livelihood away. Uh, we became very good friends later on, but uh, we through that process we kind of adopted a philosophy that less is more, and we focus more on the customer. And in so doing, we were able to provide them more services and help them solve more issues that they were dealing with. That I think was our strength. The chapter that you're kind enough to give me was about listening, and we went through a lot of effort to listen to our customers and to develop those relationships and earning the right to help them solve problems. And so I think what happened in this transition is that, and then it took some time, uh, but it was the people who built the company had to change. If we were going to continue to grab hold of our philosophy that we're building something here, and that was led by our founder, Ken Ponticus. He recognized it, and he saw the issues, and he got us all together and showed us a plan and how this was going to work, and we bought into it, and the company continued to grow. But it was at a point where the company could have gone stagnant at that point.
Yeah, and again, for anybody that missed it, the title of Jim's chapter is "The Power of Listening," and listening is one of those kind of things. It's a lot like leadership, right? It's almost impossible to talk about one without talking about the other, But you get into that debate, like, are leaders born or are they made? Is it something like, are people naturally good listeners, or are there things that you can coach or you can teach or whatever else? But it's interesting in your career because you were a sales guy, right? First off, right? You were out talking to customers yourself, making it happen. Matter of fact, I think as Susie mentioned, Fortune magazine identified you as one of the top 10 salespeople in the world. So there's probably a pretty good sense that you can zone in and really focus on kind of where a customer is coming from. Is there a difference? Is there a difference, and if so, what is it, between listening to a customer and then becoming a manager and listening to your peers or listening to the people that report to you, right? Because I guess you could say it's the same thing, but we've all seen a lot of really, really good salespeople that weren't so good internally for whatever reason. So what do you? Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if that resonates or whatever. But what is the
Yeah,
difference?
no,
Or
I mean, it was, yes, I had a great sales career, and I was very proud of what I was able to accomplish with our team. Um, the and so I had a few salespeople that were reporting to me, and that was okay. But one day I got a call from our CEO, and he says, "Jim, we're going to be merging two of our divisions, and we want you to be in charge of that." And I had no managerial experience other than like a line manager, um, and so yes, I listened to our customers. I could tell you everything about it. And I should be a poster child for putting the really good salesperson in a managerial position without training, because I thought it'd be a no-brainer type of thing, and everything was going as well as I thought they should be going. I was very pleased with myself, um, but I was making some major mistakes and that I didn't realize. And so one day, the group of people came in and said, "Hey, we want to buy you a beer. Let's get out of here." And I was a big guy on listening to customers. I quiz people about what did you learn today? Prospect or customer. What did you bring back that you didn't know about that person before? And Jim, you taught us how to listen. We're doing it with our customers. Thank you very much. But you're not listening to us. And that was kind of a punch in the nose because I loved all these people. And so we chatted it out, and they had some great suggestions for me. So when somebody came in my office, and someone would come in and say, yeah, I know we're moving to a new building, but my parking spot really stinks. This cannot be this is why you're wasting my time, is what I was saying internally. So I really wasn't listening to them. And so what I did, I got up out of behind my desk, and I went over to the sofa and sat down with the person. Sure enough, there was something else that was really on their mind. So I was learning it in the moment, learning how to manage in the moment. Thankfully, the people that I worked with helped guide me. And what I decided to do shortly after that was, let's apply how you listen to customers. And you got a whole new bunch of customers here. And that's the people that report to you, and the people that you need to hit these goals that have been laid out for you. And from there, I think I learned some really good management styles, albeit without any professional help and a lot of trial and error. But having built a really great team to be able to say, Jim, we need to talk to you. And then fortunately having the humility and being humble enough to say, okay, what's going on here? Because they shared the goals, they shared what we were building, and they knew I was off kilter. Basically, I was trying to duplicate myself and all of them.
Yeah.
The direct opposite of what you really need to build a good team. Because if everybody is thinking the same, somebody's not thinking. And to have these varying, diverse viewpoints of how to achieve the goal meant everything. And so things opened up after that. There was it's funny when I tell people that you wrote this chapter and it's about listening. They said, "Is this the same guy that I know?" It's not so much that I was a great listener. I think I became one, and through a lot of hard work. In fact, Sam, I even took acting lessons to fine tune listening skills, because if you look at any great movie or any play on Broadway, that type of thing that really strikes you, the most compelling moments are where there's nothing being said. And that intrigued me. So for 3 years, I took acting lessons for the purpose of fine-tuning my listening skills.
Well, yeah. That's, did you ever have aspirations of starring in War and Peace or anything, or going on Broadway? Or no. Yeah, it is. Just a couple of comments, and then I want to get to a couple of chat questions too here. But the whole idea of of listening, it's like credit first off to the people that reported to you, that took the initiative and had the courage, and that probably had something to do with you as well, to sit you down and say, hey, like, you're blowing it, like the stuff you're teaching us to do, like we're trying to tell you things, and for whatever reason you're not listening to us. There's a lot going on there in the context of employee engagement, leading up, taking charge, all of that sort of thing. And there may not have been a word for all of that, way back when. But credit to you, and credit to your culture, and credit to those salespeople, whoever they happen to be. The other thing is just, it strikes me, this book, Lessons from Leaders, is co-authored with two executive coaches, one probably more recognizable than the other. But Kathy McDermott was a longtime customer of mine at Merck, who is now in executive coaching and does a wonderful, wonderful job with all of her clients. And Marshall Goldsmith, by any yardstick you want to choose, is the preeminent expert in executive coaching and kind of pulling things through. And if you look at the things that Marshall typically coaches executives on, listening is probably the number one thing. It's probably the number one deal because at the top of an organization, and he wrote a best-selling book about this, right? What got you here won't get you there. But at the top of an organization, to make that final jump, it's like you got to that position because you were smart, you worked hard, you knew things, you followed your intuition, all of those kinds of things. You were the person in the room, you were the straw that stirred the drink kind of deal. And now to kind of really get into that C-suite or position of real, sincere executive, you have to listen to experts in other areas. So that can happen when you're a sales manager at the front line listening to your salespeople, or that can happen, up in the C-suite. But Angela, one of the folks that's chatting in here, she talked about listening really drives feedback. That if you can't get, if you can't listen, you're not going to receive feedback. How would you respond or react to that based on what we just talked about?
That's incredibly insightful. I remember a salesperson, and when we hired someone, they would take a year or two to really come on board, and we might feed them a transaction or two to work on, and it was in that phase that this person was all hopped up over a transaction that he guaranteed us that we were going to get, and he came back, had his tail between his legs, and said, "We lost the transaction." And I said, "Geez, Mike, why did we lose? You thought that we were going to win." And his answer to me, and in line with what Angela just said, "I don't think they listened to me." He said, "Mike, your job is to listen to them so you can get this feedback. No sometimes from a customer is a great answer, right? Because now you can fill in what void you may be missing. But unless you put yourself in a position to get that feedback, you're just going to be another person that's giving a number in a bid process as opposed to somebody that's solving a problem." So that's a very, very good question. Feedback is critical. And as a manager, feedback from your folks is critical. In our Fonseca's situation where he would call me every once in a while, and the whole purpose was to get feedback on what was going on in the market. So that question, unless you get feedback, you're dead in the water.
Yeah, it sounds basic only because it is. It's a really fundamental idea, but like as a leader, if you really listen to people and you don't punish them for telling you the truth, right? Then what you get is real information that you can respond to. If you don't have that kind of genuine relationship going on, you're in the middle of your acting class, right? Life becomes a role play where you ask a question, they give you the answer, the meeting's over, and nothing was really shared. One other question from the chat I wanted to make sure we got to before we moved on. It kind of goes back a little bit, but COVID, maybe you heard about it, the impact that it had on all of us, the last year or so. And, like we're coming out of that now, whatever that looks like. But what does the worry tree look like for people that were put into sets of circumstances where they never left home? Right? I'm not even sure they could go out to the driveway sometimes, to see the worry tree, right? But just for people that now will be occupying positions on a far more regular basis that are virtual, what any advice, worry tree? I know it was kind of a symbol in your driveway, but how would you what advice would you give those folks?
Yeah, I'd still pick something, where you can pause for a moment, where you can take a deep breath to get yourself focused on the arena you're now entering, right? And this is now you're becoming the dad or the mom or the husband, right, or the wife. It's the time to say, okay, this is part of who I am. Going in and I know some people who thrive on you know going through the problems that they just had through work. It's what they do. I couldn't do that. I didn't want to relive any issues that may have taken place. So I don't know. I'd pick something in my house and say, all right, this is my spot. This is my reminder. Maybe it's a picture of your grandmother, and you just look at her and you say, okay, I'm going to go, and now I'm going to become that I'm supposed to be, and I don't need to carry the burden of work. Because I got to tell you, those transactions you work on, those problems that you have at work, those are not the things. They're not filling up your treasure trove for something down the road. Those are not what you're going to remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it really is. It's like whether it's a tree or whatever it happens to be, it's like you're taking a conscious moment. And I think in some cases, and this plays to some personalities, more easily than others, just really very transparently saying, I need a minute here. Okay. I mean, I'm transitioning I'm just finishing up this and now I'm going to this. So give me 60 seconds. And people get that. They understand that. Whether you're jumping on a business call, or you're talking to to somebody in your family. For the most part, most people will cut you that break and give you that time and let you sort of center yourself to get there. Yeah.
Now, I did tell my wife and daughter when we got big transactions that we should be happy about it. But by the way, you have to work at it. It doesn't just happen because you have a tree or a picture of your grandmother. You really, it may be the trigger for you. You have to work at it, and it takes time. And there's going to be days where you can hit the tree if you want with your car, but it's not going to make a difference because you have some things that are weighing on you. So it's a transition. It's the reality of life. But if you're building your journey with your business career and or whatever career it may be, and you're building your family life and your service life, you better be able to blend it and be on when others need you to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, switching gears here a little bit more, I wanted to ask you about. You made a statement that coming from a sales guy, it was interesting because I think the whole idea of competition is what you want to win, you want to dominate, you want to, there's somebody out there that you're trying to beat, right? That's kind of the nature of the game. But you said something to the effect of, if there wasn't any competition, it would be a nightmare. Life would be a nightmare.
Yeah, I had a dream once that I didn't have competition, and it was a nightmare. All right, and not only competition with your customers that you're dealing with, your competitors that are offering similar services, but internally, if you're trying to be the best branch manager, if you're trying to be the best regional manager, the best salesperson, you have competitors internally. The better they are, the better you will be. If you didn't have any competition, you wouldn't need many salespeople.
Yeah.
There's only one person that you would buy the product from. So that's a nightmare to me. And so I feel like there's such a benefit when you have strong competition, that you understand their strengths and their weaknesses. You understand the needs of what your customers have, and then blend that by earning the relationship to solve the issues they have. I've gotten a lot of customers by just saying, we're not the company for you right now. This is not a problem we can solve. And they really appreciate it. And I think that's driven by, many times, competition you have. You want to utilize your time properly and bring in the long-term customer. That's somebody that's just doing a one-time transaction with you. So without competition, I don't think there's any joy.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah. Another thing that resonated, and I can't tell you how many people have told me this, because I'll ask folks, that work with us, or many of our customers that I'm honored have purchased a copy of the book. I'll say, what was your favorite story? It was, and getting things from all over the place, right? Which is the way the book was written. I mean, there's a bunch of different leaders in there, and you don't want to read it from front to back. You want to kind of go with the leader that really resonates the most to you and see what he or she has to say. But as much or more than anyone else, I hear people talk about the question I remember asking was, when was the first time you saw leadership? When was the first time you identified it? And comparatively, like your answer, you were so much younger. You were significantly younger, than most people who, by the way, were very, like obviously, the Pat Summits and the Alamalallis of the world, like maybe they didn't even really consciously start to think about leadership until they got their first job, or whether it was a coaching job or a job at Boeing or whatever, and they were moving into management. But remember, you might tell them the story again of like when you first, like, okay, that's I don't know what that is, but that's leadership right there.
Well, I as you know, I grew up in this little town in New York called the Bronx, and a very popular game would be to play stickball. So you'd have like a broomstick with a ball they called a Spalding. I'm not sure they make them anymore, but and you had a way of choosing up sides. One captain would throw the broom to the other captain. They grab it, and then you put your hand on top till you get to the very top, and the opposing captain had the option to let that person choose first or try to kick the stick out of his hand. And then if you kicked it out, you get to choose first. So we go through picking out the teams, and is always the last guy chosen. And it's like nobody wanted to be the last guy chosen. You wanted to go hide behind a telephone pole. You didn't want to be that guy. And this particular time, the last guy chosen, the captain of the team, walked over to him, put his arm around him, and I remember it as if it was yesterday, and he says, "Hey, Joey, we can't win without you." And that to me, I remember my reaction as a kid. I think I was 12 years old. I said, "That's not fair." You're so great. It's not fair.
Yeah.
You guys are going to win.
Yeah.
It's not fair. You did something great. And it was. You could see this kid perk up, and he wasn't looked at as that last person chosen. He was looked at as part of the team. And that to me, it was like, is a vivid memory I have about leadership.
Well, I'll tell you, a lot written on that since that point in time, right? Where people like me that kind of follow people like you around, leaders, and say, what are these folks doing? And what are the stickball captains doing? It's like, weakest link theory and the whole idea of identifying with the team and all of that sort of thing. But you're right. A lot of something in the last 10 years that has really come to the forefront is, emotional intelligence. It's sort of like that used to be something that, people didn't even equate with business success or leadership success, or that was something, if you want to do that on your own time, like go ahead and pursue that. But when you start thinking about like things like empathy and just like putting your arm around somebody and saying we're glad we got you, right? Let's do this thing. You're on this team. That's the way I wanted it to work out. Boy, oh boy, that does so much to contribute to the overwhelming success. And you remind me of another opportunity I had to interview a very famous coach, years ago by the name of Pete Newell, who was a Hall of Fame basketball coach, won the Olympic gold medal, with like Jerry West and, in that era, kind of in the way back era, won a national championship at Cal, was a big time coach before sports went really prime time. And I remember asking him one time, like, how do you manage superstars? Like, how do you, like the real big name athletes and the real, kind of and he says, I never spent 1 minute of my coaching career worrying about superstars, because superstars are getting enough recognition from everywhere. You know, the kids at school, the media, you know, all of that kind of stuff. I was always the most concerned about the kid that sat on the end of my bench, the kid that was never going to see the floor, the kid that if that kid didn't feel like he was part of that team, wasn't going to practice hard, wasn't going to, you know, all of that stuff. So I think that's a huge lesson out there, you know, for leaders that still resonates, you know, today. It's like whoever the last person picked would be, and I guess there has to be somebody like that. They should feel as big a part of what's going on as whoever maybe your, you know, the first or second pick was. Yeah.
Kind of like what someone said to me once, what's ever commendable, whatever is excellent, praise it. You know, hold that person up. And you know, as our company grew and different types of people came in, because we were really out of one cookie cutter for so long, I was astounded that once you gave a person the stage, even the most quietest person was a tremendous contributor to solving a problem or coming up with an idea that would raise the bar for all of us. And so that kind of diversity of thought was really critical to our company growing from 60 million to 4 billion. And it was difficult initially to accept. But once we opened our eyes, opened our hearts to that, man, it was a floodgate. And so I think giving praise is one of the greatest things you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell you what, we're kind of entering our, you know, kind of the end of the hour here, and certainly want to, you know, kind of, you know, guard people's time. But you know, two questions and kind of dig deep for both of them. You talked a little bit about the first one already, but you know, like looking back, right? If you had to do something different, you know, like in terms of sort of, you know, lessons for leaders based on your career, like you know what, like I did the absolute thing I intended to do when I was there, given all of the variables that I knew that were in front of me. But had I known then what I know now, I would have done, you know, maybe two or three things differently. What would those things from your perspective, what would they be?
Oh, okay, so this is sort of like opening my soul. And but I think the number one, if people would pick up on this that are on this podcast, um, and I do it quite often now, maybe because I've gotten older. But I'm a guy that you know initially lived in a housing project, and to have had the opportunities of the people that I've met and the opportunities to make money, which was a driving force for me out of school. My parents never had money. Um, uh, I would have, through that period, through that career, been more thankful. I would have taken more of a time out to say, "You lucky son of a gun, you have any clue where you're at in life compared to what you thought you were going to be." When I was looking out at the East River through the Astoria Project windows in Queens, that's before we moved to the Bronx. The I would have been more thankful. Um, I would not, even though I had a worry tree, I would not have worried as much as I did about things that were in the moment. Things like transactions that you know we had to make because of the board. I mean, look, I'm not going to change what I did going back or any of that, but there is a degree of concern and stress that almost in order you think to cross the finish line. And so I would continue to embrace, and I have in other efforts of my life, to build something. I'm constantly, when I get involved with something new, I'm excited about it. I just joined a new parish. We're building a new building, but there's a couple of ministries that I'm helping to build on. I would I remember that that those transactions don't last, but your relationships do. And I was hard pressed the other day thinking about this podcast today. I was hard pressed to think about a real specific transaction, but I can tell you so much about the people that I worked with, the customers that I had. I know where their kids went to college, and I know what they're doing today. And so I've been very, very blessed. And I think taking more of a time out to be thankful and to say, hey, this is a great journey, and man, oh man, the journey hasn't ended yet, and there's still better things ahead. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Oh yeah.
that's where I'm.
Well, I think it not only answers the question, but as several people are saying in the chat, it answers it very genuinely, and it's highly appreciated. I was asked a similar question not too long ago on something like this, where my seat was reversed, and my answer wasn't as good as yours. But I'll tell you what, I had something to say. Like, it's almost impossible now not to be more aware of things that you were completely unaware of years ago. And maybe you were aware of things, but your awareness, there were boundaries to it. So, like, here's my life, here's my thing, here's what I'm doing, and I'm just focused on me and just, kind of my family and my job and my company and my this and my that. And the fact that things are not, equitable or whatever you want to call it, in another environment, I got nothing to do with that. That's kind of over there someplace. And I think in many respects, if you take a look at it, is that leaders across the board are really far more aware, of all kinds of different things. And by the way, the impact that they can have in a positive way on all of those things. Not that we need to agree on the strategy or anything, because we never will, but you have to be more aware. You have to be more aware today with everything that has gone on coming out of COVID and everything else. You've got to be more aware of the dynamics and the environment around you and what people are going through. And like I say, I think culturally, it's easier now to say thank you and to appreciate what you have, and to kind of do what you can do to make sure that you spread that around as much as possible. You led into it, your answer to this one, but final question for you: how about the future for leaders? What does that look like? How does it remain constant or similar, to some of the things, like to stickball in the Bronx and what leaders do, and how is it different? What advice or lessons would you have for leaders of the future that may be listening to this LinkedIn Live session?
Well, when you ask that question, I think about what Alan Mulally said in there, and someday you're going to get me to meet him, because I would love to do that.
Yeah.
I think he said, to serve is to live. Now, all the things that we talked about and we chatted about, I don't think they're going to change. However, there is a change in the workplace and workforce that is taking place, that I think it's just a matter of being open again by listening, so that you can mold what is proven works. The things that leaders in your book, Sam, talk about, these are proven, tested ways of serving others, and that isn't going to change. However, we don't know if there's another COVID around the corner or whatever is going to happen, but someday we'll look back and say this is the good old days. So embrace the moment, embrace the time that you live in, and make your mark. Right? I said earlier on, many parts, one team. Everybody has all of these gifts. Use them in the time frame in which you're living, and live every day. I'm 73 years old, and I've got projects I'm working on. So I'm going to have projects to the day I die. I think it's going to be a very exciting time for our younger people and people that are on this podcast. It's going to be different. So be prepared for hurdles. Set your expectations already. Things are going to change. But human interaction, caring for one another, and caring for the people who are on your team, that's not going to change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you say you're 73, and let me be the first person to say you don't look a day over 73.
And let me be the first one to tell you, I hear that all the time.
But I got to tell you, I'm honored that you did this session, first off. I have seen you in action. I have the benefit of seeing you in a variety of different settings, and no one could argue with the fact that you are a leader. You have developed a number of relationships over time that are just, genuine things in many different aspects of your life. And I'm honored you were on this session. And also, I'm honored by the fact that you were the first interview, for the book. Sincere thanks from everybody at the Center for Leadership Studies in that regard. And I will say thank you. And Susie, I'll turn it back over to you. Appreciate it, man.
Sam and Jim, we can't thank you enough for today's genuine conversation. I think that came through throughout the entire hour. So just wanted to thank you. And for our listeners, to learn more about Jim Duncan or Lessons from Leaders, please visit lessonsfromleadersbook.com. Also, if you're interested in signing up for future events, please register on the Center for Leadership Studies LinkedIn page. Thank you so much for joining.
This book will give you a wide array of really interesting, thoughtful, and practical ideas from some incredibly wise people.
It provides such a rich variety of leadership journeys from so many great leaders with different backgrounds, experiences, and areas of focus and service.
I think you're going to find this entertaining, it's going to be practical, and it's lessons from leaders that you can take back and use.
Pick up a copy of Lessons from Leaders.